importantly, possibly tomorrow morning, the foreign ministers of the EU will meet and congregate here to discuss what kind of action they can offer, what kind of assistance they can offer. We don't know yet who exactly of the 15 European Union member states and their ministers will be here, but I'd gather that there would be a very important meeting tomorrow.
Well, an event like this shouldn't take them completely by surprise. Is there already a network, an operational system within NATO to deal with this kind of threat?
Well, we had mixed reactions from NATO initially. First of all, we heard that the entire complex had been evacuated, and then we were told that only staff who wished to leave could leave, and that the core staff who work on security have been retained, that they're still there. So NATO have told us later on today that it's business as usual, and I'm sure they are working now to see what kind of assistance they can offer the states, but also more importantly possibly to make sure that this kind of attack doesn't happen in Europe.
Yolo Abdafid in Brussels. Well, preventive measures were also taken in Moscow. Sarah Nelson, exactly what did the Russian authorities do?
Russians have increased security quite markedly around government buildings. The personal security service for President Putin has been ordered to return to their posts. Troops are on high alert, and the anti-aircraft force has also been placed on high alert. On top of that, airports around the country have got much greater security in place. All flights to America have been stopped from Russia for the time being. There was a long meeting of security officials with President Putin within a short time after the events began to unfold in America, and a couple of hours ago President Putin himself appeared on television to extend his condolences to American people, but also to make very, very clear that Russia regarded terrorism as this great new threat of the 21st century and was urging the international community to come together in efforts to try and defeat this threat.
So it suggests that Russia not just is showing solidarity with Washington, but it also feels deeply threatened itself.
That seems to be the case from the Kremlin, and the Kremlin is not saying very much more than it's taking preventative measures, but this has come as a big shock here. There's been wall-to-wall coverage of what's been going on in the States all evening. A scheduled football match has not been televised. There was a moment's silence there. People here are pretty shocked, as one might expect.
From around the world, Sarah Nelson. Frank Gardner's in Cairo. Frank, what's been the reaction from the Egyptian authorities?
Well, Lise, I think some of your listeners may be appalled to hear that there has been jubilation in some quarters in Egypt. That has not been the official reaction. President Mubarak has condemned it. He's gone on television. He's made a very passionate speech calling out for Egyptians to sympathize with Americans, saying that they're sorry for the victims. He said that he'd been warning about this kind of terror if Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon didn't do more to move towards peace, but he said we never expected something like this. Egyptians all over this country, and there are more than 60 million Egyptians, they're glued to their television sets. The streets are half empty. But many people there were saying, well, this is great, it's happened to our enemy, now they can have a taste of how the Palestinians feel. There's a feeling of now it's their turn to suffer.
And will the Egyptian authorities feel necessary to take any enhanced security measures?
Well, there already is quite high security in this country anyhow. They have martial law here, effectively. Ever since the previous president was assassinated 20 years ago, this country has very tight military security around all public buildings. There's a huge number of people in uniform. That hasn't visibly changed, but of course they'll be reviewing procedures at the airport.
Frank Gardner in Cairo, thank you very much for joining us, and that's our roundup of correspondence for the moment on our BBC World Service News Special. I'm Elise Doucette, and for our listeners just joining us, a reminder of our main story. Huge rescue operations are continuing in the United States after a series of coordinated attacks in New York and Washington caused devastation and huge loss of life and provoked shock and indignation around the world. 2 airliners deliberately crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. Both buildings collapsed, sending huge plumes of dark smoke into the air of the city. A third plane then crashed into the Pentagon Defense Headquarters, which continued to burn for hours after. A fourth plane crashed in the city of Pittsburgh. President George W. Bush addressed the nation, saying those responsible will be hunted down and punished. The entire nation is said to be reeling. Well, it's caused a huge, devastating impact, not just politically, socially, but of course, it's also had a huge impact on the financial center, because of course the World Trade Center is the nerve center, not just of the United States, but of global capitalism. Mark Ashford, give us more details.
Well, that's right. It's really a strike at the hub of America's financial infrastructure. 50,000 people work in the Twin Towers, did work in the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Its largest tenant was Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the investment bank. They occupied 1/8 of the space. Lehman Brothers also have headquarters there. Up to 200,000 people pass through the World Trade Center daily. So a huge shock to the financial infrastructure. US markets didn't open, but there were sharp falls in stock markets across Europe. In London, the FTSE 100 index ended down 5.7% at 47.46. There were steeper falls in Frankfurt, where the stock market lost 8.5%, and in Paris it was down 7.4%. The oil price has surged. Gold has gained too. Some doubts now over the dollar. It's currently down 1.8 yen against the Japanese yen and 1.5 cents against the euro, which now buys 91.5 US cents. The European Central Bank has announced that it is ready to step in with payments to support markets, it says, after the series of terrorist attacks, should it be necessary. A statement from the bank said the euro system stands ready to support the normal functioning of the markets. In particular, the euro system will provide liquidity to the markets. I'm joined now by Charles Goldsmith, the Deputy London Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. Charles, what would Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, like to see from his peers at the European Central Bank?
I think, first of all, unrelated to this, he has wanted a cut for some time from the European Central Bank. Related to this, he would like to see, as you mentioned, the liquidity problem. Markets are very light volume after an event like this. In the U.S., you mentioned the World Trade Towers with 50,000, but the area around there, which was evacuated today, who knows how many people will be back there tomorrow, many more.